Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation titled Classical Music Profession and Entrepreneurship. I am studying music management at the moment, but I'm also originally a classical musician. Having studied classical music performance at the music college and seen many people's career, I realized that building a successful career in classical music is very challenging. Perhaps because of the traditional image of classical music, the way it is marketed and promoted has not changed that much for decades compared to other genres of music. But society is changing rapidly with digitalization and the way in how people interact with music. So I believe some effective changes should be applied in the classical music scene too. Today, I will be speaking and discussing following this content. Firstly, I will discuss the purpose of this preliminary study and the research question. And next, I will explain the meanings and definitions of arts entrepreneurship to make it easier to understand for everyone using some quotation from existing studies I've led through this research. Then I will introduce the methodology and explain how I conducted the pilot study. And I will then summarize and analyze the findings of the questionnaire, comparing and contrasting with my opinions and existing academic articles. Finally, I will discuss the research questions to be addressed in my larger study and which methodologies to use. It is very difficult to make a living as a classical musician. Only a few top musicians can make a living from concerts and CD sales. Perhaps it is a basic premise of the lifestyle of an artist, but unstable income and schedule are a bottleneck in the life of a musician. If they want to have a stable income, classical musicians often choose to join an organization such as an orchestra, opera company, or music agency. This is also not possible for everyone, and in order to join a well-known organization, you have to compete with other musicians with similar aims and pass an exam. In addition, if you want to have more freedom in your choice of music and self-performance activities, there is a big possibility that this will be restricted. Although the number of students studying performance at university and conservatories seems to have increased in recent years, there is a very long way to go to become a successful classical musician in this way. This presentation is about what obstacles are found in the classical music profession, and I'm going to talk about the word entrepreneurship in art sectors and how the term of entrepreneurship or entrepreneur spirit is understood by young classical musicians. So I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship in the art sector, in other words, arts entrepreneurship or cultural entrepreneurship. What exactly is arts entrepreneurship? What skills does it require? And what effect does it have on a musician's career? Are very vague, and there is no right answer. Exploration of the literature in which the term cultural entrepreneurship is used does not bring a solid, clear-cut, and unambiguous understanding of its definition or meaning. Very few higher music education provide training of the business and entrepreneurial skills needed to make a living as an artist in society. There is a constant debate and confusion among educators as to what entrepreneurship is. I'm here to talk about entrepreneurship from some of the references with some definition. So what is an entrepreneur? The previous definition used the term a person who organizes, manages, and undertakes the risks of a business. Entrepreneurship is all about problem solving, about meeting needs in your community or within the marketplace you hope to reach. And what is arts entrepreneurship? It can be defined as the development of skills associated with the application, sharing, distribution of creative work. In other words, cultural entrepreneurship claims to be a way for cultural workers to avoid unemployment. In the music profession, entrepreneurship can be said as observing your field, area of interest, market, or community with an eye for musical opportunities. One study has identified three distinct categories of artist entrepreneurship. There is career self-management, in which the artist is employed and creativity fulfilled. New venture creation, in which the artist needs to set up a new business and may build it. Finally, being enterprising, which means to a certain market need and adds a certain type of cultural value. What effects does entrepreneurship have on the career in the arts sector? The scale of this entrepreneurial mindset expands from self-management to a larger organizational scale that allows individual musicians to launch institutional support structures for a community of like-minded musicians with a desire to perform. It is necessary to extend the idea to other areas, including art. The true artist, in other words, should presumably be conceptualized as an entrepreneur. And as an economic entrepreneur has his imitators and followers, so does the artist. Both the artist and the entrepreneur are dynamic, active, and energetic, and show leadership qualities, while their followers are passive and static and accept the way things are. There are many ideas that artists should be entrepreneurs and that they are like entrepreneurs. But how do the artists themselves feel about this? A number of studies have shown that while musicians, especially freelance musicians, understand that entrepreneurial skills are essential to make a living, artists have been reluctant to learn about entrepreneurship because of the money-making image. In fact, some creative individuals reject the idea that art and culture should be considered a business, believing that they should be kept separate from the commercial world. In a study conducted in Sweden, some musicians expressed a very negative view of being referred to as entrepreneurs. It shows the majority of musicians are only reluctantly accepting entrepreneurship as part of their musical identity. Because artists are driven by a passion for the art and not for the money. But differently, it would be better if they accept that what they do is entrepreneurship and that entrepreneurial skills can be trained and used in the pursuit of a professional music career with decent incomes. The aim of my preliminary research is to understand how young classical musicians who aspire to become professional deal with their careers and what aspects they find difficulties and insecurities. Almost all the literature and studies I have read for this research have used qualitative research methods. In particular, many of them use interviews with semi-structured questions to gather more in-depth answers. Although there are a few blogs and websites by experts or people within the music industry on the internet that features classical musicians, There is the idea of literature that goes into depth about the career of classical musicians and how they are marketed and promoted. In this study, I have firstly broadened the scope of my research to include arts and music in general, rather than just classical music, and have read relatively recent and relevant literature focusing on definition and commonly accepted concepts such as what entrepreneurship means to artists and musicians and what the creative or cultural industries are. For my pilot study, I conducted an online survey with young classical musicians. The methodology is a qualitative study using open-ended questionnaires. The target group is young classical musicians who are planning to make a living as professional classical musicians, specializing in instrumental music or singing. Unfortunately, although I have liked to receive responses from a larger number of people, I could receive only 7 answers. Respondents were from classical music performance students at the London College of Music and from my previous music college in Japan. In my larger study, I intend to widen the scope of the survey and consider ways of getting more responses. The final respondents were 4 pianists, 1 violin and viola player, and 2 singers. 2 of them are based in the UK, and the others are working or studying in Japan. The questions are divided into 3 main categories. First, about the career of classical music. Secondly, about social media, which should be regarded as an important marketing method in the current world. Finally, I asked the question about entrepreneurship. This survey focused on what obstacles are in the way of pursuing the career in classical music and what they found necessary to achieve this goal. I expected to hear a relatively common response, but even with a small number of answers, I was able to get a surprisingly wide range of ideas. Firstly, when asked if they would like to belong to an organization such as an orchestra or opera company or music agency, 5 out of 7 respondents said that they would like to join an organization in some way because of the following reasons: to have a stable salary, to have support in case of an unexpected situation like the corona pandemic, and to have more opportunities to perform. Reasons given for reluctance to join an organization were that it would limit the freedom of solo performance activities, and that if they were to join a music agency, they would have to give a big amount of their income to the agency. While those who said they wanted to belong to an organization in some way, most said they do not want to stop playing independently as well. Next, when asked what fears and difficulties they face in pursuing a career in classical music, there were 2 main opinions. I thought that the difficulty of making a steady income would be the main concern, but half of the respondents were more concerned about the future of classical music than their career itself. Some respondents argued that the concern is the fear of dying out and the difficulty of attracting a potential customer base, as many people are not familiar with classical music, so it would be a big challenge to keep the old traditional art of classical music alive in the modern world. As a final question about careers, I asked them what they believe is necessary for a successful career in classical music. The one thing that was agreed upon by almost everyone was the importance of connections. Half of the respondents also said that background and experience of being in competition were necessary to approach an audience and be recognized in the music world. Other interesting responses included the mental aspects such as courage, confidence, and love of what you do, as well as the skills such as the ability to communicate and appeal to others. This is what I like to explore in more depth in my larger research. I feel that there is a perception that musicians will do well as long as they have the skills to perform, but in reality, this is not the case at all, and it has become clear that they need to think more strategically in order to build their careers. I believe that social media is a marketing tool that should be used effectively by classical musicians. Although I have an impression that few classical musicians use social media as a marketing method, younger musicians are aware of its importance. 5 out of 7 respondents are using or planning to use social media for self-promotion, and even they who said no are aware that it is a needed tool to help musicians. Instagram seems to be particularly strong in reaching out to young people. Facebook is used by many professional classical musicians because it is accessible to a wide range of age groups and because it is a real-name social media platform. TikTok allows videos to be seen by a wider audience without taking too long to spread and easily reach out to teenagers. You could decide which social media platforms to use effectively by narrowing down the target or the audiences you are specifically trying to reach. Finally, when asked if they think entrepreneurship is important for a successful career in classical music, 5 out of 7 respondents said yes. For example, they mentioned the importance of making choices that make a best use of their abilities in the selection of music. Being original enough to interest the audience in concerts, flyers, websites, and social media, and a creative spirit. It is interesting to note that half of the respondents mentioned promoting and reaching audiences on their websites and social media. A surprising similarity between entrepreneurs and musicians was shown in the opinion that in order to live independently as a musician, it is essential to have the ability to create your own ideas rather than being employed. The question of entrepreneurship still remains, but I believe that all the answers given in this survey can be said to be entrepreneurial skills for classical musicianship. When I got these results, I was reminded of the difficulties in being a product that I had read about in the study about women's self-promotion in the classical music profession. In the study, the difficulties of identifying and marketing oneself as a product in self-promotion are very closely linked to this entrepreneurship of the musician. According to these respondents, while musicians perceive music as something emotional and loving, in order to make a living as a musician, they have to consider themselves as a business and a product. Approaching the audience as an attractive musician, in other words, a product, is actually running a freelance business. In conclusion, it is clear that although entrepreneurship for musicians are poorly understood and vaguely defined, the ideas, strategies, and skills required by entrepreneurs are essential for classical musicians to have a successful career. Even when they are part of some kind of organization, self-promotion is quite important as most people want to continue their solo career as well. While past research has shown that there is often a reluctance or negative image of entrepreneurship among musicians, younger musicians seem to recognize the importance. In my larger study, I like to continue with qualitative research and content analysis as well as quantitative research. I intend to conduct a close-ended questionnaire and in-depth interviews with a few young classical musicians. I will continue to analyze an implication and definition of entrepreneurship in the field of art and music. If possible, I'd also like to reach out not only to young people, but also to professionals who have already lived and worked as classical musicians, to ask them about the changes in the way they market themselves in accordance with social changes and what was actually necessary to make a living as a musician. I believe the research in this field will provide a benchmark for how to build a career for classical musicians in a society that is changing rapidly. Unfortunately, while conservatories and music college provide performance students with sufficient musical knowledge and performance skills, they often do not teach them the business skills of how to build a career. Although some academic pedagogical articles have addressed the lack of training in these entrepreneurial skills in conservatories, this is still an area that needs to be explored about the career and marketing methods of classical musicians. There is no doubt that it is a very competitive world, but in the world of developed digital technology with great communication tools, the bar for self-promotion has been lowered. I hope that this study will be one of the tips that will help young classical musicians to use the internet and social media effectively to self-promote, develop entrepreneurial skills, and continue working to make people classical music more accessible. Thank you for listening.